A couple of notes, refreshments over there, please help yourself. Thanks to our friends at DNR with Earth Day and Arbor Day around the corner. Maryland native tree seedlings are available in that corner of the room. Thanks to Director Pinsky's leadership in the Senate, we now have to plant 5 million musical trees. Everybody gets we have the honor of planting. Everyone has to help out. So those come with instructions to log the plantings in the new tracking system. And I believe Anne can give us a quick primer on what to do with them.
This is a gray dogwood, and it's really little. It's been root dipped to keep its roots moist, but with climate change, most of them have already broken bud. So plant them soon. Don't leave them in the sun. Keep them cool and shaded until you get them in the ground. If they have to wait a little bit, you can peel them in, just take a little slit in the ground and put the roots in a nice cool place. And I planted its cousins, silky dogwood, in my yard, and they're beautiful rounded bushes with white panicles of flowers. And this kind has white berries. Birds love it.
Right.
Give it a little room to spread. It's pretty hardy.
How big
Thank
are they?
you. Yay big.
Yay big. Oh, okay.
And there are a couple of little fact sheets over there, with one with more planting instructions and one with a little better pictures. So thank you so much for doing your tree.
Thanks so much. And a note in the room, we have several participants remote. The microphone is there in the center of the table. It's impressive technology. It will pick you up even if you're whispering. So be mindful of that. So I'll do some quick attendance now and turn to the secretary. For brevity's sake, I might just sort of call out all the members of the commission who are present. Later in the agenda, we'll have time for introduction and discussion. So I see here in the room, Chair McElwain, welcome. I see going around the room here, Dr. Dickerson, University of Maryland, our People's Counsel, David Lapp, Vice Chair Stein from the House of Delegates, Dr. Peter Goodwin, Director of UMCS, Administrator Belton, our county representative, Mike Howell, one of our business community representatives. We have Charmaine Brown, our co-chair with a focus on climate justice, Director Pinsky of MEA, Secretary Flora, welcome. Secretary Kurtz, welcome. I see Secretary Addix, Secretary Wiedefeld. Great to see so many new faces. Remotely, I see Ann Lindner, one of our co-chairs. Let's see. For a moment. I see Colby from the Farm Bureau. Colby, do we have Wayne with us?
No, I'm here on behalf of Wayne.
Great. Welcome, Colby. Okay, so that may be, oh, I see David Smedick. Welcome, David, one of our NGO participants. Okay, great. Thanks, everyone. And I know a couple of commissioners will be joining shortly, for example, Treasurer Davis. If we could bring the slides up on the screen and turn to the agenda, I'll just give an overview of the agenda. Next slide, agenda. Yep. It's great. And if we could also, we'll figure it out in a moment, arrange it so we can also see the faces on the screen. In any case, so we'll start with a traditional welcome from the chair, Secretary McElwain. We'll have a brief discussion of the Moore administration's priorities for climate change. This is the first climate commission meeting under the new administration. We'll turn to an introduction and kickoff. We have a lot of new members, so we'll present a little bit of background information about how the commission works, give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. Then we'll turn to the always popular legislative session roundup, a discussion of the task ahead. And that will feed into the main discussion item today, which is the Climate Commission's priorities for 2023. So with that, right open.
Okay. Hello, everyone. Good to see you all. As you all know, this is my first day chairing this commission, so bear with me for breaking rules. of the commission in terms of speaking out of turn, or saying something I'm not supposed to. This is trial for me. I'm just kidding. You all are so serious. I'll be good. So a lot of us are new cabinet, we're all here. So this is new for us. And I know you've been briefed from maybe not one of you, Josh, you've been a part of this secretary. So, but yeah, I'm just happy to be here, happy to be the chair. I do plan to be here each time, and I would hope to see all of you here going forward. For me personally, I prefer to see the principals here. I know there's a provision where we can have substitutes, but just from my own perspective, it's good because these decisions that we're making are so high level and so important. I just want to make sure we have the voice of the secretaries and all of you, everybody here. So I wanted to start with that. So in terms of my formal introduction and talking points, I want to talk about the governor's vision and priorities. I think that's how we set the foundation of what we're going to be doing going forward in terms of this administration from the perspective of the governor. So Governor Moore, he laid out a strong vision for climate change and environmental justice in Maryland. And so I'd like to just take a couple seconds to share the priorities that he sent to us for me to read out to them. So number one, we will move Maryland from a state powered by oil and gas to a state powered by renewable energy and achieve our nation-leading climate goals. 60% greenhouse gas reduction by 2031 and net zero economy by 2045. The governor has set some more specific targets as well, including reaching 100% clean electricity by 2035. 2, we will be strategic and aggressive. We will draw upon Maryland's extraordinary assets to make this transition. For example, we have some of the best scientists in the world here in Maryland. The commission and our partnership with UMD to draft the climate plan this year, bring those assets to bear on the issue. And the administration has made an aggressive start, for example, by quickly moving to adopt the Advanced Clean Cars 2 program to achieve 100% light duty electric vehicle cells by 2035 and quadrupling our offshore wind goal to 8.5 gigawatts and moving to make Maryland the offshore wind capital of the United States. And you all know this, but I'll say it, we will leave no one behind, right? So this is the basis of, for me, this is the base from the administration. And this is where I'm going to be thinking and making my, my comments and suggestions and recommendations all line up to these priorities, which are my priorities too. Thank you. And I guess I'll turn it back over to you.
Excellent. Yeah, and I'd also like to open for any of our co-chairs who'd like to have any opening remarks as well. We're missing one co-chair, Kim Coble, today, but we have Charmaine Brown and Ann Lindner with us. Care to?
Thank you, Madam Secretary and Chair. I would just reinforce that the climate justice team is committed to its part to apply the equity lens to all of the work, the great work that is underway in the state. You all know that we have come up with a vision that anchors us so that we are all on the same page and that we are clear about what we mean when we say equity. It's a word that can be confusing, but it's really about looking at where people are and what they need and ensuring that we're asking a series of questions that ensures that no one, I'll say, is left behind, because that's now the thing that we're saying in the state, but that people are represented and represented well. And one of the things that I've said to the CJ team, the climate justice team, as we looked to expand our group to be more inclusive, that representation without inclusion is tokenism. And so making sure that when we have people at the table with different perspectives, different experiences, that we listen to those people. And that's a real key to making sure that equity is part of the conversation. So we were, fortunate to have the secretary attend one of the climate justice team's meetings to ensure that we are aligning the vision and where the state is going. We've only had a couple of meetings this year, so we are not far in terms of what our specific goals and objectives will be. But rest assured that we are committed, we are in full alignment, and we are looking forward to the great work that's going to happen working with all of you for years. Thank you.
Yeah, and just hi everyone. It's Ann Limner from the computer. It's good to see everybody again. I think from my perspective, it was a really interesting and exciting legislative session. The passage of the offshore wind bill and several other measures that will sort of help lead us to our greenhouse gas emissions reductions goals. Working within this group and with our friends at the legislature and the administration, I think will be really important so that we can move Maryland forward in a way that is as fast as possible, but also makes sense for customers. So great to see everyone.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, so next we'll move to the commission introduction and kickoff. I neglected to mention earlier that we always reserve time at the end for public comment. So if there are any members of the public who are joining online and if you'd like to be added to the list, please put your name in the chat and we'll add you to the list. And then for those in the room, when the time comes, we'll turn to you as well. So we'll have a brief bit of PowerPoint here for the commission introduction. It'll be up on the screen here shortly. More. Perfect, thanks. Okay, so the mission of the Climate Change Commission is to advise the Governor and General Assembly on ways to mitigate the causes of, prepare for, and adapt to the consequences of climate change. So each year by November 15th, the Commission produces an annual report to the Governor and General Assembly that includes recommendations for state action. That's the fundamental purpose of this body. Next slide, please. In terms of its membership, the membership is set in state law. And as you all can tell around the table, it's a mix of state agencies, members of the legislature, local government, businesses, environmental NGOs, organized labor, philanthropies, and scientists from universities. Next, we'll go through the roster. The materials are available, the calendar invitation on the website. So if you want to keep this as a reference document, this is the full roster. The Secretary of the Environment is the chair. We have co-chairs. We heard from Ann and Charmaine. We also have co-chair Kim Coble, voters who wasn't able to make it. The treasurer, in terms of standing members, a number of state officials, the treasurer, the superintendent of schools, the secretaries we have around the table today, the director of the Energy Administration, Dr. Goodwin as president of UMSES, University of Maryland Center for Environmental Science. We have the Farm Bureau, the chair of the Critical Area Commission, which is, as of, I believe, yesterday, Eric Fisher. Congratulations, Eric, here in the room or online. And the People's Council, David Lapp, is here with us. And there's more. There are two experts from the university appointed by the governor. Dr. Dickerson is here on the table. Dr. Kirschling sends her regrets. The Senate President and the House Speaker each appoint 5 members, 1 member of their chamber, 1 NGO representative, 1 business community representative, 1 organized labor representative, and our nonprofit representative. We do have 2 vacancies right now. The Senate position recently vacated by Director Pinsky has not been refilled yet, and we have 1 vacancy for a philanthropic representative. Those are both appointments by the Senate President. And then there are 2 representatives, local government appointed by MACO and MML. Administrator Belton's here with us today as the MACO representative. So it's what's that, 27, 28 people, broad cross section of leaders and experts throughout the state, and your role is to find consensus on solutions to climate change that we can advance through state policy and some other avenues. The commission is organized into working groups. And so up on the screen here are 8 working groups under the commission. The ones in gold are the original, the 4 original working groups. We'll talk about them in a moment. The ones in gray are the ones that were newly established by last Now Act. Those working groups are not yet up and running. MDE recently received resources in the budget to stand them up. We're in the process of standing them up. So more to come on that as we get the energy industry revitalization working group, the energy resilience and efficiency working group, just transition working group, and the solar photovoltaic system recovery and recycling working group up and running. But the 4 original working groups are very active. And so we're going to take a moment now to hear from the co-chairs of those working groups, just briefly, what that working group is all about. I'll note that as members of the commission, you are encouraged to participate in the working groups. And we have many participants in these working groups from lots of different organizations in addition to commissioners. So if you're interested in any of them, don't hesitate to volunteer. Why don't we go alphabetically, starting with adaptation and resilience, chaired by Secretary of Natural Resources.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you for having me. Really excited to be here for the first meeting. So far, fantastic. The ARWG, we would welcome any and all participation. I think a really important function of this climate commission, and it's really looking at how we help Maryland become and our county partners become a lot more resilient in the face of a changing climate. We're seeing a wide range of different impacts across our communities. And so what we are tasked with is developing a 10-year plan. We're in the first year of development of that plan that will lead us to have a much more resilient Maryland as we look to the issues of climate change moving forward. So we're toying with a little bit of a change in structure. The other working groups, like the mitigation working group, has co-chairs that are from nonprofit and industry sectors. It has been just the department. We're looking to expand that to reflect how the MWG operates in the other working group. So that's something we're working to initiate rather quickly. We're hosting meetings soon. I don't have it. For some reason, I can't get on the internet here, so I can't tell you the exact date, but we'll send it out afterwards. May 31st. There we go. And would welcome any and all participation. Thank you.
Secretary for doing that. The next one is the education, communication, and outreach working groups. Our co-chairs, I believe, are online. I know I see Amy on the list, Amy Lambert. Barry Walker co-chairs that. Hey, Amy.
I'm here. Hi, everyone. I'm Amy Lambert. I'm with EA Engineering, Science, and Technology, and I'm one of the co-chairs of the Education, Communication, and Outreach Working Group. Our goals are really to communicate with our Maryland constituents about climate change, about the changes that are happening legislatively, and to kind of educate them. So we manage a webinar series, we manage the commission website, and we're generally doing a lot of like educational programs and things like that to continue our outreach efforts.
Thanks, Amy. Next would be the mitigation working group, co-chaired by Mike Powell and Vogel.
I like to describe our group as doing the first draft of recommendations for what goes into the plan. We're charged with coming up with recommendations to reach the 60% number by 2031. What we've been doing recently is focusing on a couple of areas: the need to accelerate solar development and the need to accelerate the adoption of electric cars. In both, we've got real problems. One of the things that we had the presentation most recently, I'll go ahead and share this with you in a draft report, so don't take these numbers as final, that we're about north of 14 million metric tons short of what we need to achieve by 2031 to meet the numbers. That's a large gap we've got to achieve. And that modeling, again, is draft, but it assumed all of the existing policies, including clean cars too. Some of the areas of concern are that at the current rate of renewable power creation, we're only going to be at 48% renewable power generated in state 2031. Again, an estimate, all right? And in fact, our importing of power from out will increase. So obviously we got to do something to increase solar adoption. On the electric car front, we're looking at what kind of incentives we would recommend that the commission consider. Right now, some of the incentives on paper look good, but when you go to see what's available, it doesn't go very far. The estimates we've gotten from experts is that the money for incentives for electric chargers, for example, might be exhausted within 2 or 3 months after the start of the fiscal year. The federal incentives, though they are potentially huge, it looks like it's only about 10 makes of cars in the nation that will qualify for the full incentive. And even though you have to fall within this category of making less than a certain amount of adjusted gross income, yet owe $7,500 of taxes at the end of the day. So expect us to be coming back with recommendations on both of those areas as well as other areas to the commission to try to get to the 60% number that are in the statute. And again, I've reinforced, we are always looking for additional help. Anybody with expertise or ideas, please bring them to our attention.
Thanks, Mike. And then scientific and technical working group chaired by Dr. Goodwin.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chris. Good afternoon, everyone. So first of all, we represent almost every higher education institution in the state. And the members are there not just for their own expertise, it's not when the questions come up. You couldn't possibly have 20 people and expect to cover everything. So we do expect that the members know what's going on in their institutions so that if an issue comes up, we can reach out to that expertise wherever it is in the state and get the right people to the table. So we really have 2 tasks. One is we respond to scientific questions raised either by MDE or the agencies or the commission itself. And we're always available to do deep dives on those issues. And the second thing that we do is to track scientific developments, the papers, technologies that could have relevance to the work of the commission. And it's our job to bring that to the attention through Chris and MDE to see if it's worthy of distribution to the commission. So that's who we are. I think it also just touches the interinstitutional collaboration that you see across our higher education institutions.
Great, thanks so much. So those are the 4 existing codified working groups. Again, more to come on the 4 new ones. We could bring up the deck again here. In addition to the working groups, we have, as Charmaine mentioned earlier, Climate Justice Steering Committee, which we formed several years ago as sort of a cross-cutting element of the commission drawn from, next one, please, Chris. Drawn from liaison from all the other working groups, and its job is to sort of ensure that the commission is taking an equity lens to everything it does. I don't know if Armin, if you want to say anything more about how the Climate Justice Steering Committee or Climate Justice agrees.
I think the only thing I would add, Chris, is I think it's important that everyone understands that the Climate Justice Steering Committee members are embedded in the work groups. So that brings the continuity where they can contribute to, the discussion and then bring that back to the entire team as we seek to apply the equity lens to the work. So I think that's the only thing I would add, making sure that we're thinking about low-income families, families in the urban centers, rural communities, and, sort of asking a series of questions to see who's helped and who's harmed. But to know that we have experts embedded in each work group, I think is important. Thank you.
So I'd like to just take a diversion from the agenda for a second because all the secretaries are new. And so I just wanted to give you all an opportunity to say anything you'd like or ask a question before we get into the details. There's a lot of details coming next. So I'll start with you, Secretary Ford. Anything you'd like to say or tell us?
Well, first of all, I'm really thrilled to be here. This is area of my passion, all the way back to undergrad and grad school, environmental science, environmental energy planning. I led at the Federal Home Loan Bank. I chaired the Affordable Housing Advisory Council, where we implemented I said it couldn't be affordable, but wasn't affordable to operate. So, have led net zero 178 acre brownfield redevelopment projects where it's climate action plans. You know, this is my realm. And so I hope to contribute as much as possible. And I would say with a practical hat on, because I've worked on the academic science side, worked on the policy side, and we still have to make, you know, we have to do things that we just actually implement in practice. I think in terms of my role at the Maryland Department of Planning, there is huge opportunity to really integrate. I love how you're forming your work around, because I think if we can integrate some of these across all of our agencies and with other colleagues here, it's the only way we're going to meet those. We have to bring it into all of the work that we're doing and find ways to do that. So excited to be here.
Thank you. I'm happy you're here. All right.
Yeah, Josh Kurtz, the Department of Natural Resources, also very excited to be here. I think you forgot resilience planning too.
I've done that too.
So,
Colorado.
excited to have expertise with ARWG. Yeah, I think just the partnership element and the focus of this is bringing in local governments, industry, all of the agencies. I mean, we're talking about solving global system change in our state. It's obviously going to need a lot of really innovative thinking. I'm excited by, the goals that you've laid out and the administration's laid out. And I'm really looking forward to kind of digging in this room with all of you to make sure that we can achieve them. So I will agree. I think very excited and yeah, ready to get to work.
And you're in a different position now as secretary. You've been a part of this position.
Had the pleasure of
It's exciting.
sitting on the MWG with Mike and working with Chris here. So yeah, it's nice to sit at the big, like the adult level now.
I almost
So
want to
it's-
say that.
No, it's really exciting. Thank you.
So happy to have you, Josh. All right, Secretary.
Thank you very much. I've lost my voice, pollen. So, if we could
I
fix
just
that.
started regulating that.
Start with that as a priority. First of all, it's a privilege to be part of this as Secretary of Agriculture. I was president of the Environmental Club in high school and have a degree in environmental studies and am extremely excited about the work that can be done. On behalf of agriculture, I'll say that obviously agriculture is a huge part of the solution. And so that's the role we want to play. You will hear from me time and time again that these proposals need to come with balance. And I'm thinking solar on farms, and I'm thinking about all the regulations and the move to zero emission vehicles can be tough if your last vehicle was $380,000. Right? That's what we're dealing with farm equipment. So I look forward to being part of the discussions and bringing a different perspective, but moving it forward.
That's why everyone's voice is important.
Voice. I'll work on it.
Okay.
I'll work on it.
I'll move on with that.
Hi again, Paul Wiedefeld, Secretary of Transportation. I just want to, I'm not sure what role the department played in the past, on the commission, but I will commit to you that we will have a very strong role at the department to be strong partners, obviously, with the commission, but to meet the governor's goals. The reality is, the reality is without transportation, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible to get there. Because it represent roughly, the transportation sector represent roughly 40% of the greenhouse issues that we're dealing with. So we have to be at the table and we have to be very proactive in it. Mr. Powell mentioned it and the director did earlier about solar panels. We will be coming out with something pretty shortly. I've asked for where are we. I know that maybe haven't been as strong as we should be. And so particularly some of the properties that we own. I did do solar panels on the Dela Garage at the airport when I ran the airport about 15 years ago. But I haven't seen many since. So you'll see more of that in the very near future. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else new to the commission? Okay.
Any of the old hands would also like to.
Yeah.
So that could be- Or the young kids like the rest of
Particularly since we're setting the tone with new members, new cabinet, I think it's important for us. You're going to come quickly, but this is your opportunity to quickly. Yeah, just whatever you feel you need to say to, just to enlighten us would be appreciated.
You might want to have the two authors of the Climate Solutions Ballot talk about how we're doing.
Well, why don't we start with author number one?
Thank you, Madam Secretary. It's ironic, a number of years ago, Mark Felton was in a different position. He served as a secretary. Now he's in a different position. I, at the very beginning of the Climate Commission, served as a legislator, and now I'm in a position in the governor's cabinet working for the governor. And then we have other people who've held the same position. Russ Dickerson is a lead scientist, Peter Goodwin, and Michael Powell. No. I'm stuck in the mud over here. Manufacturing, I'm sorry, I'm confused on that. Look, one thing I've learned is that what the legislature passed 2 sessions ago on the climate bill, 60% by 2031, and the governor's goal of 100% clean energy by 2035, they dovetail. I mean, you can't lower greenhouse gas emissions unless you replace with clean energy. And to be frank with you, and as one of the authors, it's a heavy lift. They're both going to be heavy lift. Michael's exactly right. We did a lot of the low-hanging fruit, the LED lights and the street lights. Now we're getting into the area of tough choices.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, there might be more people who don't like some decisions because it could affect them. So when everyone is a kumbaya and we're win-win, but it gets more complicated when you take tough choices. So Madam Chair, you're going to be at the front of that, at the head of that, and I'm sure there'll be some bruises, and hopefully all of us will be behind you, supporting you and offering suggestions in the future.
Thank you. I think I need a before picture of my face. This is the first and the after. Thank you for that. And I know, there will be some tough choices, and we do have to come together, make decisions. And that's why, it's going to get tough. I mean, because agriculture, transportation, planning, industry, NGOs, we're not going to agree on everything, but I just ask that, sometimes we have to take the passion out and look at it from a whole different perspective than our own. And then when we do that, we're able to make decisions a lot better when you look at it from the good of the state, right? And not just the good of a particular sector. That's a part of it, but sometimes you have to go a little higher, a little global, and then, have those hard conversations. So hopefully together, my job will be to try and get us to a place where we can, make those tough decisions together.
And if I just add one quick thing, about Justice 40, about environmental justice, whatever we call it. Yesterday, I was in Germantown with the governor, where the largest solar array on affordable housing was officially opened. Montgomery County, Green Bank paid for most of it, but it was pretty exciting, that they're putting their money in affordable housing communities in terms of solar. Today I had the pleasure to speak in Scotland. It's a community actually in Potomac, shocker, where they have put a resiliency hub and they have affordable housing there. So if power goes out, people can go to the community center to hold their medicines or medical equipment or their laptops or whatever. And again, it's around affordable housing. There's a small section within affordable housing, believe it or not. And this was, we cut the ribbon today with the county executive, and my agency was able to get some of that money. So the idea is keeping that front and center. I just want to reaffirm, and in MEA, we give out a fair amount of money. We are making that one of our clear markers in terms of ensuring that the people who've been left behind, either consciously or unconsciously, but that's another discussion, are brought up. And it's also complicated. I mean, you know, putting EV chargers in front of multifamily units when there's not parking, it's complicated. But we're pledging in our agency at least keep that front and center. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and anyone else?
Sure, I'll offer a few thoughts. First, thank you, Secretary McElwain, for your leadership and of the department and of this commission. And it goes without saying, the work of the different work groups and certainly the annual report and multi reports that are produced by the commission, very important, leading the way in terms of policy changes. And I should say also that the legislature pays a lot of attention to the reports. 2 years ago, Mike's work group, the mitigation work group, focused on buildings. And when we were drafting the Climate Solutions Now Act, I guess more than a year and a half ago, some of the language from that report, the building report, was taken word for word and put into the legislation.
Some people still haven't forgiven me.
Right, I'm sorry. You can blame it on
Careful what you put in
San Francisco.
reports.
And similarly, you know, when last year the commission's annual report came out with a series of comprehensive recommendations, a lot of attention, some of which was reflected in legislation, and I'm sure the same thing will happen next session with respect to the report that the commission provides later this year. I do want to echo the comments that Senator Pinsky made about challenges, and also what my colleague said about funding. There certainly the IRA, it will provide a lot of funding with respect to electrification, with respect to EVs, but probably not as much as we had initially hoped. And the state level, certainly we're doing a lot in terms of increasing funding for EVs, but it's not enough. And for other efforts to electrify different sectors, which is the heart of what we're trying to do. So we'll have to, we'll have to think about ways to come up with the resources that will be necessary for us to make that kind of transition, which we know is important. It's a good investment economically and of course for the environment as well.
Yes. Thank you for that. Yes.
I'll jump in really primarily just to introduce our office because we're a pretty small office. I'm with the Office of People's Counsel, David Lapp. Thank you, Secretary, for the opportunity. We are the residential ratepayer advocate in the state. And so we're looking at things really from the impact of all this on utility customers. We've done a couple fairly comprehensive reports on the transition to electrification and the impacts on gas utility customers in particular. We have some reports on our website. We've highlighted the impact on low-income customers in particular as we transition to electrification. And I'm really happy to be here and thank you.
Thank you. Very good to meet you. I'm going to turn it back over. I will just say, just since this is, I will say the first meeting. To me, it feels like our first meeting. If we can all just keep in mind going forward, the common reason why we are all here at this table as a commission, and that is to address climate change, right? So that's why we're here. That's the name of the commission. I think when we're getting into our debates about these very serious issues, just keep remembering, well, am I helping or not when it comes to climate change? That might help you change a little, all of us, right? I may change my position and you too. The second thing I will say is also, the last thing I'll say is always let us try to get to win-win. We don't win if we hurt your sector. You don't win if we hurt your sector and your sector and your sector. So if we push in our heads, we're here to address climate change and we're here to win win, not win, lose. No one should lose as we're going forward in these discussions. That's all I wanted to say.
Great, thanks so much. And we do have a hand up for Colby. Sorry, participants online, commissioners online, please don't be shy to raise your hand.
Oh.
Colby from Farm Bureau.
Thank you all, and thank you, Madam Chair, for giving us some time to kind of talk about it. And I want to apologize for our President Wayne Stafford not able to be on today. But as you can expect, with the weather as outside right now, I actually talked to him. He's on a tractor planting soybeans. So I told him, I said, I'll take one for the team today. So I did want to just basically say, that with this new administration, comes new opportunities and rejuvenated discussions. And, one thing within the farming community, and I think Secretary Addix said it very well, that agriculture is a climate sink. We are there to consume greenhouse gases and to remove it from our atmosphere and utilize production of food while also addressing climate change issues. And so, one of the things that I want to make sure is put out there is, I've listened to our new governor and really talk about overburdened and underserved and not leaving anyone out. And I really want to stress that because I firmly believe that Maryland farmers are overburdened and underserved when it comes to assistance within this fuel and energy discussion. I'll just give a couple examples because I don't like to just throw things around and then not give you some examples of why. But for 2 years now, we've tried to pass a bill in session to remove the sales and use tax for electricity that's used on farms. In both years, we've gotten hung up because there's not enough money in a bloated $63 billion budget to remove that. But we have fuel is tax exempt for off-farm use, particularly diesel. So my thing is why would a farm look to take on even more electric use, especially when they're hit with a commercial use cost, and then you add on the 6% sales and use tax? Farmers lose prime and productive farmland right now to solar facilities because the state hasn't prioritized the lower quality soils, particularly on farmland, for producing the electric. We haven't prioritized growing food over producing the energy. And the last thing I'd say is that, the state is pushed to remove all petroleum-based fuels in the state and, but unfortunately include only electricity as an alternative, which pretty much throws agriculture under the bus because we don't have electric farm equipment. We don't even have heavy use trucks yet, much less to even look at tractors and the other things that we use. So, we need to prioritize states around us. Pennsylvania, Virginia, a lot of the Midwest states have looked at low carbon fuel standards and looked to incentivize the use of biofuels and renewable fuels, whether it be renewable natural gas or to replace propane, or biofuels, biodiesel to replace petroleum-based diesel. But we haven't done that in Maryland, and we need to think that way, that we can't go from petroleum to wind and solar and expect not to leave people behind. So I want to throw that out there at the beginning. You're going to hear a lot from me. I sit on the mitigation work group as well, and will be the squeaky wheel throughout this discussion because I firmly believe that the rural sector is very difficult to, and I don't think we want to leave them behind. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. And so we'll move to the next spot as a reminder for participants on the phone or online. If you'd like to participate in public comment later, please put your name in the chat and we'll add you to the list. So if we could bring the slides back up for one final note on the commission's organization and work. So the work every year leads up to an annual report that's due November 15th, though there is a bill on the governor's desk amending a number of report timelines that may push that back to December 15th. In any case, the commission owes that report at the end of the year. So generally the year's work begins like today with meetings about what are we gonna do for the year, so to get to know you type stuff. The working groups work over the course of the year on various topics. to establish recommendations that they then sort of vote upward to the commission. And then in the fall, the commission has some very exciting meetings where you will be debating and voting on various recommendations to include in that annual report, which then gets voted out by the commission, hopefully there at the end of the year. It looking likely that it may be December rather than November this time, but we'll talk specific timelines once we know the fate of the refill. The report is usually quite, the commission tends to be quite prolific with recommendations, especially certain working groups that Mike Powell chairs. There are often dozens of recommendations, and I'll just know that that's always a challenge, is there's so much to talk about, so much to be done, that we perennially have the challenge of focusing time on priority actions when there are so many different things we can talk about. So just a heads up, that'll be some of the fun over the course of the year. So if we could move then to the next agenda item, which is a little bit of information about the task ahead. And if it's easier, Chris, I wonder, I could probably bring up on my screen, that may be easier for us to be able to see. The deck and the people. So we're going to give it the session roundup and a bit about the task ahead. I may shorten the session roundup part a bit as we're devoting lots of time to discussion, which is really good. We're taking this in sort of reverse order, looking first at the task ahead. Yeah, Chris, if we could minimize the one with my face. Make room. Click the unpinned one on the left. So in June, thank you. So our first deadline for the plan required by the Climate Solutions Now Act to achieve the new goals is in June. We're working with the University of Maryland Center for Global Sustainability to produce an analysis of pathways.
Can everybody see that? Because I see that most people don't have the handout. That looks really small. Can you all see it? Okay, you have it on here.
I see fine.
Okay, the chat. Close the chat, yeah. Somehow we can't make it go.
There you go.
There we go. All right.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So in June, we will, we're working with the University of Maryland to do sort of a pathways analysis. This will show various ways the state's energy system and other systems could change to achieve the goals. These pathways will include some sort of conceptual policies that could be consistent with those energy use other system pathways. Then that's due in June, and then it'll be out for public comment. We'll do outreach. We'll have lots of discussion with the commission and its working groups. And then in December, we own the final plan, the 2031 greenhouse gas reduction goal, and also to put us on course for net zero by 2045. And that will have the specific policies and specific analysis of those policies to show how we're going to get there. And then many years from now, in December 2030, we'll pick it up again to finish things out through the net zero by 2045. So Mike mentioned earlier some preliminary analysis. So I'm just going to some numbers to frame our best estimate of how much work we think we have to do this decade and in this planning process to achieve the new 2031 goal. So the University of Maryland has completed a preliminary reference case. This is an initial step in the analysis where we say, what if the state called pencils down on new policies and decisions and we just sort of coasted with the decisions we've already made? How much does that get us? That tells us roughly how much additional work we have to do, how many new programs we get out there. And under that analysis, which is shown here on the left, this is projections of statewide greenhouse gas emissions broken out by sector of the economy out through 2050. You can see the 2031 line in the middle. It's the one that's got the note pointing to it. The estimate is that under current policy, and assuming current policies all work out, will be about 14 million tons short of the 2031 goal. That's the number that Mike gave earlier. That's a good number. It's a good sizable number. Those are the reductions we have to secure as we put together the plan this year. The pie chart on the right shows in 2031, where are those emissions that are left? And I may zoom in here a little bit. Transportation would remain the largest sector, but not quite as much as in the past, thanks to strong reductions from vehicle electrification that we're anticipating. But one takeaway is that this traditionally smaller sectors are going to grow more and more important, as in particular where decarbonizing the electricity system quickly. It used to be the largest share of emissions. It'll soon be one of the smaller ones. So there's going to be really hard work figuring out how do we get that last mile from lots of smaller sectors, many of which are much harder to abate. For example, agriculture and industrial processes. So 14 million tons is the number we gotta hit for new actions this year. We also have a different way to look at this, which is out through 2031. Which sectors are we expecting to move the fastest? You'll see that electricity, we are expecting the steepest reductions at 81% reduction by 2031. That's appropriate in some ways, since decarbonizing the electricity sector is a prerequisite for decarbonizing other sectors where electrification is a key measure, like electrifying transportation. But this just shows sort of the balance of where we're expecting reductions to come from in different sectors over the coming decades. Okay, so if there are no questions on that, that's hot off the presses. The university presented that to the engagement working group last week. There'll be much more analysis to come, regularly updating the MWG as that progresses. We now have an overview of key bills that passed this year that map against commission recommendations over the last couple of years. And so for each of these bills that sort of are at least on the same topic as a commission recommendation, we've sort of color coded them, not according to our judgment of the value of the bill, but just how similar is the bill to the recommendation at hand. Is it about exactly the same thing, or is it about something else perfectly good, but maybe sort of only partially addresses the specific recommendation? So this goes sector by sector. You all have this if you'd like to reference it. So I'll sort of keep things light here. In transportation, there were a number of significant bills. For example, the one at the top, the Clean Trucks Act, which requires us to adopt the Advanced Clean Truck Fuel, zero emission truck regulation. We are eagerly working on that as we speak. There was also a governor's bill, the Clean Energy and Transportation Act, that will provide important funding for that. This is related to a specific recommendation last year. Last year, the commission recommended that we adopt that regulation and provide funding. The commission also made recommendations about multifamily residential EV charging. There was a bill on that topic that doesn't exactly look the same as what the commission recommended, but it's that we can see progress there. And then the commission has also recommended a number of times that the state fund electric school buses, and there's an allocation budget for MDE to begin doing that. Some good progress there. On clean energy, the commission has made many clean energy recommendations in recent years. There were some bills this year on similar topics, making the community solar program permanent up at the top. There's a new task force to study solar incentives. You all may recall that there was one recommendation last year about solar deployment. I think that was probably the most challenging discussion we had last year, wrestling with the challenges we've heard about already today about balancing land for solar versus ag use. How do we get the panels we need, managing all of these other needs? So the commission produced one recommendation that was so long, it was number 14. It had subparts. We had to go all the way to letter K, I think. So there were some bills that touched on some of those items this year, including that task force and making community solar permanent. There was also legislation to establish an energy storage program. That's something that the commission has been pushing for a while. 1897. A couple more clean energy. The commission recommended a renewed focus on prioritizing energy efficiency in low-income households with is, as we all know, a real challenge to do. There was legislation on that topic. Increasing state support and goals for offshore wind. And there was the offshore wind bill we heard about already today that increases the goals and establishes new processes. We also have a couple of things that aren't legislation here, but are sort of governor actions. So one of them is adopting advanced clean cars 2. The commission recommended that MDE do that. And one of the secretary's first actions and the governor's first action to MDE was telling us, yes, go do that. And so we're doing it. And then there was also an agreement with multiple states organized by the Department of Transportation around expanding MARC train service. The commission had made recommendations of microtransit associated with MARC trains. So those are so there are a number of bills that were similar to recommendations that didn't get passed. And then there are also other bills not on our list that we didn't map to specific recommendations. But welcome thoughts from anyone in the room about the outcomes of this session, any work left undone, any promising momentum that we can build upon based on what was very, very busy session in Vice Chair of Science Committee, among others. And to put our legislative representative on the spot, Delegate Stein, is there anything you'd like to offer about the outcomes of this session or any of the specific?
I know, in terms of recommendations with respect to solar deployment, we'll, be looking to see what that, what the outcome of that study is. I would say also certainly more effort with respect to EV charging and multifamily residences. And then also, there's, sort of unrelated to legislation this year, but as follow-up to Climate Solutions Now from 2022, lots of interest in seeing the results of the studies and regulations that will be coming out from that legislation, be it with respect to BEPS, the PSC study, all electric for new buildings from the Department of Labor. So a lot of interest in those as well.
Chris, the failure of the Empower bill, I think that's somewhat significant, which could have been some steps forward. And I think actually it'll end up being some steps back. We can come back next year, but I think it would have been an important gain if that could have passed in its strong form that the House worked on. So.
I might add that I think in terms of legislation, I thought the session did make a lot of progress. Not everything, absolutely right. Where from my standpoint, watching it from the mitigation work group, we had struggled most of the time funding stuff. Because there's a lot of things where on the books, and perfect examples, charging electric cars or installing charging in multifamily. But there really weren't a lot of additional funds. They're accepted in school buses, a perfect example. But I think one of the things that we have to look at is not just what do we recommend that we enact, but what do we recommend that we fund, because I think we do have problems.
If I could just follow up, Mike's comment is right on point, but then also going to transportation. And of course, one of the commission's key recommendations, as you said, Chris, was, and Mike, that we really need to accelerate electric vehicle deployment, both with respect to passenger cars, and then also heavy and medium duty trucks. And it was certainly the latter recommendation that got a lot of traction. Now, as with so many things, there was a compromise that was brokered and said that, well, MDEs to implement the California Clean Truck Rule, subject to a needs assessment study and a determination that we have the capacity, the infrastructure, incentives, et cetera. And, as with so many things, compromise sometimes needed to move the ball. But I think in general, there's, the legislature, there's increased recognition that, yeah, we need to, with respect to regulations, but also in terms of funding, need to do a lot more to accelerate EV deployment.
I'd add to the green space equity bill. I think the opportunities there for, working with communities that don't have access to green space and some of the sequestration potential from those places, and those types of green infrastructure, especially in our urban centers, not necessarily the big bites of the apple, but doing important things in terms of climate justice and some sequestration.
Thanks. From a scientific and technical standpoint, these goals are indeed daunting. But there's reason to be optimistic as well, I think. The Maryland Department of the Environment has always been open to the best available science to guide its policy, and we've been very successful in a number of problems, like lead, carbon monoxide, ozone, acid rain. So I'm optimistic about attacking the problem of climate change as well. And something specific is some of the actions have multiple benefits. For example, I read with great enthusiasm the push for electric heavy-duty vehicles, because they're a major source of black carbon and NOx, and these are important pollutants in a number of things, including water quality in the bay and environmental justice especially.
You're focused on legislative comments right now, right? Okay.
Well, sure, but.
That's okay. I'll let you into your next agenda. Go ahead.
Okay, so as we, and we've got another hand, I'll get to in a second. So as we sort of, well, part of the role of the commission, especially early in the year, is to direct the working groups. Like what do you think, what are the priority projects for the working groups? So we've heard thoughts on legislation that didn't pass. Those in particular are areas where we think it'd be helpful for the commission to weigh in and do work over the course of the year, potentially charting a path forward for viable legislation next year. That's often very helpful input for the working group co-chair. And Colby, I see your hand up.
Thank you. I just wanted to know that the medium and heavy duty trucks bill was brought up, and there were amendments added to that, and I don't want those to be taken lightly. Those were the discussion for anybody that sat through our mitigation work group discussions during last year. That was the biggest concern of the trucking community, of Farm Bureau, of anybody in the real world that has to use this equipment and has to see that a very short timeline of between now and 2027, there's a tremendous amount of infrastructure that is going to have to be put in place. And a lot of that is going to have to be public infrastructure. It's not going to just be private. And I mean, I've been on the Commission for Climate Change for a lot of years, 8-9 years now. And we have not had this discussion of how we're going to roll out the infrastructure that's needed. And so I guess my question is how, I know it's probably too early in the time frame, but this was couched on to the Department of Environment to do this needs assessment. And I guess my question is that something that the Commission on Climate Change is going to be involved in, or is this going to be done internally? And we certainly hope that it's not just OLAID. This is, I mean, for us, for these businesses to roll out and put those large trucks, electric trucks in the system, the infrastructure for the grid capacity and resilience is going to need to be looked at. If you start putting a huge influx of energy use in a very concentrated area, like Laurel or places like that, where you have a lot of those trucks coming in and out, that's going to be a big pressure on the grid. And so I just think that those are things that we really need to focus on. And 2027 will be here before we know it.
Yeah, that's right. So the Clean Trucks Bill, in addition to directing MDE to adopt the Advanced Clean Trucks regulation, it also directs us to work with a number of other agencies around the table here to produce a needs assessment and deployment plan. And so, yeah, that's a good point. Question only about how we should coordinate that to the Climate Change Commission. I mean, we always like to coordinate other reports to the commission. I think that would mostly be a mitigation working group item. We have until I don't recall whether it's October or December next year to produce that plan, but Colby will definitely put that item for mitigation working group work as well as the departments as we, you know, if that bill becomes law, as we start to put the plan for that plan. Okay, yes,
Maybe this is time for
Yeah.
my question. So I'm looking at the slide and I forgive me in advance for the fact that I'm jumping in. I haven't reviewed gas inventory or any of the other background materials, but as I look at the pie chart, what would be helpful, and I'm sure you have it, in detail of your THC inventory, but as I look at industrial, commercial, residential, for instance, as an example, understanding the breakdown of plug load versus the process load versus the actual, you know, heating, cooling type load would be really interesting to know, because that's going to help us really, because like, as you said, we already did the low hanging fruit. So to me, what's curious about all of this jumping into it the first time is there's no demand side on this equation. And so everything's really focused on supply side. And so what I'm want to learn more about is understanding what's going on the demand side, because it would seem, just on my superficial look at this, that the more we can understand that aspect, it gives us lots of opportunities to push down demand. And I'll give you a quick example. For instance, I worked for a group that wanted to get to net positive. Guys, you can't get there. You have to really look at this closer. So what we had to do was combine energy code adaptations in our zoning to actually have a requirement for what the energy demand, you know, side was of any new buildings, and set our standards much higher in the code and in the zoning we were approving for that master plan, for instance, combined with district energy system. Then we were able to right size solar array on site and look at how that would basically be implemented over time with offsite and onsite. And so I'm just trying to understand the comprehensive model here of how you have to have these additive steps. And I know it's probably a big question, but as a first time sitting on this table, looking at this is the first thing that's coming to my mind is where are those other aspects of the equation? I'm sure, Michael, you probably have that.
No, I'm just going to comment that, of course, what you're looking here is the inventory, you know, so what the supply is now. In the recommendations, there were quite a number of demand side recommendations,
Right.
particularly on energy efficiency.
But
in trying to get to where we need to go, we're looking at the supply side. And while I got the floor, just real quickly, when you look at that, you also got to think about the timing. We're less than 8 years away from the deadline. The average fossil fuel car sold out there today, the average will still be on the road in 15 years. So even if we went to 100% electric cars today, we're still going to have mostly fossil fuel cars in 2031. So the ship is hard to turn. Okay,
it's
solar farms. It's going to take you about 7 or 8 years to do a new solar farm. You can start from acquisition. So we not only have to look at where you want to make the cut, but where can the cuts be made quickly enough?
Well, and to add to that, I would say cars will be on the road, buildings will be around for 50 plus years. And so to the extent that any new construction happening anywhere in the state right now has to set a higher standard for the energy efficiency, not to mention the adaptive reuse of buildings. So building area happens to be more of the area I'm focused on, but even if I look at land use planning and, you know, other aspects of this in zoning, instituting those things now could have quick result actually in some ways. And these are just observations. I'm sure we'll have a chance to talk more about all of these, but please point me to where I'll be able to, you know, learn more about the details of some of the slides. That'd be great.
Yeah, we can follow up on the staff level afterwards to put together sort of a briefing where we can, if you really want to go to the
I'll go
inventory, we will walk you through it
deep.
happily. And then in terms of the commission processes, you know, the MWG discusses those issues a lot, and we'd love to see commissioners participate in working groups. And then the Climate Solutions Now Act also set up a building energy transition task force, which is not under the auspices of this commission, but it's a very similar issue area, and we're setting that up, and the Director Secretary McElwain usually co-chairing it. So we'd love
Right, and
that as
I would
well.
say in particular the just transition, because what I've seen time and time again is, these activities don't necessarily get consideration. Whether it be the small farmer who has equipment, that has to be modified, or the, affordable housing resident. I want to make sure that those savings through the solar are not just going to that owner, but it's going to the resident living in there who's paying this.
One follow-up question about the UMD's preliminary estimate of a gap of 14 million metric tons of emissions that will be over, at this point. What was UMD's assumption with respect to federal programs? Was it sort of proportional uptake of incentives under the IRA? Anything about the new
From
proposed
memory,
car rules?
they assumed clean cars too. They did not assume the new cafe standard. So it was a snapshot moment in time, but included some of the bigger items.
So IRA is in this scenario, Innovation Recovery. And as you suggested, there are a lot of different ways to analyze IRA. That's for their provision, what it accomplishes. They sort of steered into sort of a middle of the road set of assumptions. There are many organizations that are really bullish on IRA and fix everything. Others have been more pessimistic. So we tried to find something roughly in the middle in terms of assumptions for how those federal investments would affect it. But they are in here and they're responsible for substantial reductions. Okay. Great. So we have about accounting for public comment. We have about 20 minutes remaining for discussion, and we'd like to continue the sort of the threads we started pulling on, which is priorities for this year. I just want to put up one more piece of information here that can hopefully inform that discussion, which is just timeline. On the mitigation policy side, under the Climate Solutions Now Act, we're working towards a plan at the end of the year. And so we'll be, we're spending the spring producing that June report. That'll be issued in June. Summer will be public outreach in coordination with the commission. In the fall, we do fresh analysis with policy decisions. And then here's the sort of tricky part. We're going to be working as much of that as possible through the commission. But the commission's report and recommendation will be due November 15th or December 15th. And then that plan produced by the state agency in cooperation with the commission is due at the end of the year. So we will have some questions near the end of the year. What does the commission have to say about greenhouse gas mitigation when there's going to be a formal plan following maybe 6 weeks after the commission's report or maybe 2 weeks after the commission's report? So this is especially a question for the MWD, I guess, and how it focuses its efforts. But this is going to be kind of an odd year for the commission's annual work since there's the climate planning process going on in parallel. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that the answer to how much the commission should focus on long-term greenhouse gas reduction policies may be different this year considering that parallel process. And MDE staff's recommendation would be that the commission take a similar approach as we did last year, which is that we know there are a whole bunch of things we need to do already that we haven't done, and we don't need another plan to tell us that. So maybe we should focus on getting those actions done without waiting for another plan. So that's just a little bit of conceptual staff feedback, but we'd like to hear from the commissioners about priorities for the commission's work this year, priorities for the co-chairs in terms of how they focus the working groups, limited time, and also how we end up focusing the commission's limited time when you all are evaluating recommendations later this year. So the floor is open for thoughts on that.
And let me add, the MWG has always listened to and made a focus of whatever the commission wants to focus on. Right, the focus on buildings that first year, I think, came out of the commission recommendation. So whether it's here now or later, please communicate to myself and my co-chair Ken Copel if there's something you think we should be making a focus. We meet monthly. I think we meet more than any other of the working groups, but still have to prioritize.
Yeah, I'll jump in. We had a number of recommendations last year about electrification, gas planning. Some of those didn't have the opportunity to really get vetted well within the working group. Of course, we had the buildings report 2 years ago, so not sure how much of that we need to replicate. But we had those commissions come up in sort of the final meeting. And I want to make sure that, those still remain very important. They're more important now than ever. So I just want to make sure that, we had, gas transition planning, gas line extension policy, different aspects of how we go forward in terms of electrification, impact on customers, the future of the role of fossil fuel infrastructure in the state. I think that should remain a priority. Not sure how much of the work that's been done in the past, I think a lot of what was in the buildings report from 2 years ago remains very relevant, if not more important now than ever. So I would want to make sure those are a priority.
Yeah, I want to underline, Chris, your point about there are two processes going on. And I think you need to be very aware of that. The department and the secretaries are viewed with coming up with plans for the climate solutions bill. It is the department. The Climate Commission does an annual report. Clearly, there's dialogue, there's ongoing dialogue, and there's cross-fertilization. But when the June report comes out, I think people should be very thoughtful and conscious and intentional of, even if we haven't adopted the Climate Commission's report, talking with the secretary and Chris of what things you think should be in the department's plan on the climate solutions reductions. So I don't want, I just think Chris mentioned it, but we have to be very aware of that when we wrote the bill, we said NDE is the lead agency. That means the secretary is going to submit a plan come December or whatever. And obviously there's a lot of interaction between Climate Commission, and there are a lot of great minds here who can give input to the secretary and to Chris and the agency of what should be in it. But we have to be very clear about that. So I don't think people should assume that things in the report come November, December are automatically in the plan. That's all.
It'll be much too late, right?
It'll be much too late. And come June when they do their draft. Those next couple of months, people should look at it, and whether those are offline reaction conversations, maybe one of our meetings does get asked for feedback. That's obviously up to the secretary. But I just think all the members of the Climate Commission should be very aware there are two distinct processes that they overlap in many, many ways. And in the past, as Michael said, the ideas that came from this became legislation. So it generates important ideas, but I want to underline what you said, Chris.
And a quick programming note, sorry, we've had some requests about Wi-Fi access. Password, public network password is 1800-1800 WASH. W capitalized?
Nope.
No, but if that doesn't work, try capitalized.
Oh, thank you. I apologize for coming late, and I want to introduce myself to you, Secretary McElwain. I'm Beth Harbor. I work for the Able Foundation. We're based in Baltimore, Maryland. And I know we have a lot of new commissioners here, but I'll just add to David's point, and then also Paul Pinsky's point, that we joined, I think, in November of 2021 to the commission, but I still feel like a new commissioner. There's a lot that goes on at the commission. And so helping on board in terms of the processes and the committees and how the issues are raised and then brought from the committee to from the working groups to the commission could be very helpful for me as a reminder. And then also, going forward, since we don't have a lot of time in the year to meet as a group and a lot takes place in the working groups. And I wanted to give a shout out to Michael Powell also because I'm not on the mitigation working group, although I thought I was for about 6 months. And so I've really enjoyed the meat of those discussions and appreciate you bringing lots of new ideas and energy to that committee.
Again, just to repeat, we welcome any commissioners who can sit in on the vision working group meetings.
Yeah, I think we had Dr. Goodwin.
Actually, I just wanted to highlight a couple of the recommendations that clearly the work of this commission, this is a huge lift, and if we're successful, it puts Maryland right at the forefront, not just in the US, but globally. And there were two recommendations. Secretary McElwain, you probably realize that you have some incredible staff working,
Yes.
Secretary Kurtz. But one of the concerns of the commission is that for the size of the challenge, it's an awful lot on a very few people. And there was a recommendation there to take a look at the staffing resources and where the agencies needed to beef up so we're not burning out some really talented individuals. And then the second part, again, this gets to the scale of the challenge, is there's recommendations in there. The state's already doing several things for innovation accelerators, but there was recommendations in there to create the resources to support promising research that could really position Maryland to be doing special things. So accelerating whether it's research in the private sector or if it's in the academic community, to have a vetting process. And we specifically had a couple of places where there's very rigorous peer review, where these things could be assessed so that additional resources could go in to try and bring some of those technologies and technical advancements to the fore.
Another thread to pick up from last year.
Right.
Yeah.
Just, I wanted to pick up a little bit on what Michael said and Colby said in terms of the infrastructure funding part of it, but also expanding that to include the asset management of that infrastructure. Having a department that has multi-billion-dollar unfunded assets that we have to maintain into the future. So as we put these things online, we got to find the money to do that, but then you just can't walk away from it. And so we have to include that in our thinking as well, I believe. Thank you.
Absolutely. One of the issues that I know both the Inflation Reduction Now Act and we wrestled with, you put the charges there and then 30% of them stop working. It doesn't help you sell vehicles. We pull up and our things not working. And then, we have the two communities that are particularly difficult, right? Urban communities where they may be on street parking rather than as the senator referred to. I'm sorry, you're always the senator. As the senator referred to. And also, as Colby said, the rural is, you may be talking about having to run new electric lines to a farm out in the middle of an agricultural area. So those two communities are very much on our minds as we try to work something. The other thing is not mentioned here, but that we spent a lot of time thinking about, which vehicles do you replace? If we're replacing a Prius with an electric vehicle, we get that much improvement. If we're replacing a Ford pickup truck, it's that much. If we're replacing somebody who drives it commute back and forth to work with limited range, it's that much. If we're replacing somebody who's driving from York, Pennsylvania to Baltimore as their commute, right? So in designing these systems or recommendations, you have to think, which vehicles do we want to replace? Are the closest thing to low-hanging fruit? What do we do?
I think really taking on some of that is what I would call leveling of it. You think about equity.
Yeah.
And, what might be a proportional lift to this much, a certain sector of the economy is going to be this much. So the more data I think we can have to truly understand not only the impacts of the decisions, but of who they're on, and ensuring that those impacts are leveled and that we're really focusing on the things where we not only have the biggest GHG impact, but we have the least amount of impact on the population that or least position to deal with. And so there's almost like this section of how we really examine the data-driven decisions.
Right. If you want to call low-hanging fruit for electric vehicles, a two-car garage, right? That's the easiest thing, to put one of the cars in electric, put the charger. But from an environment, a equity
You've
standpoint,
eliminated them.
that's not where you want to help them. So there are tensions that we are having to deal with. We need to get a lot of cars out very quickly, while at the same time respecting the equity.
Or better yet, get more people on buses and trains.
Yeah,
I know that that's.
we
Throw
look at
it
that.
out there.
We're talking electric vehicles, we're not neglecting.
I know.
that. But if you look at a bar chart,
Yeah.
and we've got one floating around, mass transportation is getting this, electric vehicles are getting this. So, again, where do you put that?
Yeah, it's just so many different lenses. So I would say, if you're the data, whoever's the data person, the more data, the better, make good decisions. I think.
Okay, did we miss anyone around the room? I see Calvin.
I hesitate as to whether I should even bring this up, but the point that we've mentioned a few times today, resources, I mean, in terms of issues to focus on. And I know all roads seem to lead to the mitigation work group, but I don't know whether it's something that's even within your purview to come up with recommendations. Like looking at what maybe other states have done, novel ways of raising resources to apply to those areas which need them. We can't always just say, okay, we'll take more money out of the sea for different things. So.
It's interesting, we have made recommendations about where we think money should go. I can't recall us ever making recommendations about where it should come from. So that's an interesting issue.
Let's go slow on rating C.
Oh, understood.
We have a hand up from a commissioner online, David Smetic.
Thanks, Chris. I will flag, I think I see on my screen, Joe has his hand raised as well. And I think he was before me, so I'm.
Okay, we'll turn to, we're on the verge of public comment. So Joe, you're at the top of the list when we get there.
My mistake. I apologize. With new commissioners, I wasn't sure who was what. So Joe, welcome. Invite your public comment here in a little bit. Folks, thanks. Sorry, I did have to hop off earlier. But I did want to, similar to Beth, apologize for that and introduce myself briefly before my comment. I'm David Smetic, he, him pronouns. I'm with RMI. We were formerly known as Rocky Mountain Institute, and I'm one of the NGO representatives on the commission. Really excited for the first meeting of the year and to listen in on all of the other MWG and other working group meetings coming up. Two very brief comments to chime in at the end here. To Delegate Stein's point, I would find it interesting if capacity allows within some of the working groups this year to understand some of those funding questions of where we're spending money in a positive way, where we're spending money that locks in emissions down the road in a more negative way that hurts our goals. So I think really evaluating where some of our policies currently and the funding decisions we're making are making it harder for us down the road. I think it's an interesting research question for us to consider as a commission and as a state. And then the other piece, I appreciated Director Pinsky's remarks about the timing of the different, and Chris, your remarks about the timing of the different reports coming out. And it probably is on our list for our summer meeting to be discussing the draft report that comes out, but having a similar open discussion, and maybe even as commissioners, I encourage us to have some ad hoc sidebars over the coming months once that report is released so that we can discuss it and provide feedback again, not 6 weeks before the final report is due, but in the interim to lend our resources and our minds to that, as well as the public feedback. So I just want to chime with that. Appreciate it. And welcome to all the new commissioners. I'm really excited for the conversations this year.
Thanks, David. Secretary Kurtz.
Yeah, one thing maybe just for us to consider too is a little bit deeper analysis of how some of the work in resilience and the work in mitigation fits together. There's a lot of funding streams that relate to both. And I think climate justice, it plays really well in there. So maybe an assessment early on, a nexus focused assessment. I think that gets us to where we're spending money, where that money is coming from, and the outcomes we're paying for, whether they be, electricity consumption reduction, supply, demand, resilience. There's just a lot that I think has a lot of overlap, and we're going to make decisions with finite resources. We should make sure they're they are getting us the biggest bang, the most win-wins, right, as possible. But it could be a good opportunity for us to take a little step back and look at how the solutions we're putting forward are interrelated.
Okay, so we have time for one or two more before we move to close up.
Yeah, I'd just throw out there, there's a lot of requirements, on local governments and others. And some of those are water quality oriented, right? And there's so many different means and ways and best practices to get to water quality goals. Many of those have climate benefits. And perhaps one way forward or some focus of the organization or the commission ought to be, or could be, maybe incentivizing local governments and others to follow those practices that are tuners, right? You get dual benefits. I think there's more bang for the buck if we head that way.
Okay, so this is, I think, a lot of good information to chew on. So we're following with the co-chairs on the steering committee about orienting the working group's work to focus on those in the next couple of months. If there's nothing final, I'd like to shift to public comments, and then we'll have closing remarks at the end. So online, we have 3 names. Thanks so much, Susan. We have Joe James, Josh Tolkien, and Jeff Silva on the list. Is there anyone in the room who would like to offer a comment on public? Please raise your hand. Just to count. So we'll stick online. Okay. So, gentlemen, we'll ask for 3 minutes. If you wouldn't mind keeping your remarks at 3 minutes, we'd appreciate it. We'll go first with Mr. James.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Afternoon. Yes, we can hear you.
I commend the chair and members of the commission. I'm the former president of the Prince George's County Economic Development Corporation. I'm currently a climate tech entrepreneur, and my company is deploying a process that I invented by which we plant very special and fast-growing crops to capture lots of CO2 from the atmosphere. And then we convert those crops into bioproducts, quite often displacing things that are made from fossil material. While I appreciate your strategy, there's an important element that's missing. Actually, 2. The first is that I think you will find, in the US government and scientists have found, that simply reducing the amount of emissions is not going to be enough to protect us from the full impact of climate change. There needs to be a strategy of extracting carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases from the atmosphere. And there are technologies like mine and others that are beginning to be deployed. So I would strongly urge you to at least mention that fact and have your staff do some research to understand that mitigation and reduction of emissions is simply not going to be enough. Number 2, I am very concerned about communities that are downwind of major interstate highways, like Baltimore and like my former home, Prince George's County, because there are 2 highway pollutions that are impacting health in a very terrifying way. PM 2.5, and I'm glad to see somebody from the Able Foundation is there, because the Able Foundation did a report of several years ago on the health impacts of PM 2.5. I've seen research that shows PM 2.5 causes stroke, and it impacts the health of women and the children that they are bearing. The other pollutant, even more less well known, is tire wear pollution. Every time your wheel in your car turns, tiny particles of rubber are being scraped off. Unfortunately, rubber is made from very dangerous materials, including something called carbon black, which has arsenic, lead, mercury, et cetera, in it. And the other bad news is that electric vehicles are going to be substantially heavier than standard vehicles, which means that the amount of tire wear powder pollution is going to grow dramatically. So I would urge, Madam Chairman and Commission members, that you create a health focus and partner with the appropriate other agencies in the state to look at highway related pollution, By the way, the California Air Resources Board has done a report recently on this issue, how it's impacting California, and you might find some allies there. And I hope you'll approach the U.S. Department of Transportation and other federal agencies to seriously look at both PM 2.5 and tire wear powder, and increase the amount of stations in the state that are testing the air quality, particularly for communities that are downwind of interstate highways, which unfortunately tend to be Black, brown, and poor. Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope I get a chance to provide input at some of your future meetings.
Thanks so much. Thank you for your attendance through the meeting. Next is Josh Tolkien. Josh, we see you.
Hi, afternoon. Thank you for the opportunity to speak, and hello to all the commissioners, secretaries, and everybody else. My name is Josh Tolkien. I'm the director of the Maryland chapter of the Sierra Club. And I wanted to thank you for hosting this meeting and just for all of the work that I know goes in at the commission. Many of you know, but I want to let you know Maryland has robust and strong and passionate participation from civil society, from people and communities of faith, environmental health, water quality and watershed groups, economic justice organizations. There is a huge and growing climate movement. A lot of research has shown that when it comes to deploying anything from electric vehicle credits to weatherization opportunities, the involvement of civil society, from churches and environmental groups, is one of the factors that can make those as cost effective and help drive down the price. So broadly, participation is not just good for getting ideas, but it's also good for more effective, cost-effective implementation. I'm going to date myself, but I was an advocate for the first Global Warming Solutions Act that was passed in Maryland. I've been involved in the process since the passage of our first climate goal. As an observation, I think there's been a historic disconnect between the Climate Commission and our climate plans and the legislature, and even at times the administration. If you compare, let's say, the Climate Commission to the Kirwan Commission, in the Kirwan Commission, there was a really clear through line between the commission's work and the inevitability that it was going to lead to legislation. I think, as Mike Powell may have noted earlier, there's a lot of the commission's recommendations which have not made it into legislation, and I think that's diminished the sort of the quality of like the public's sort of confidence in the commission's work. I would urge the commission to really think about how to strengthen that through line, perhaps laying out what the administrative or legislative vehicle would be in the development of its plans, not as an afterthought after the plan, so that as each step is taken, it's really clear if, for example, it's going to be leading to 2024 legislation or executive orders. I think there's so much of that layered on already from the transition plan that in a lot of cases, what we really just need is action. Lastly, I did want to note that many of us are concerned about some of the existing policies where we're not currently on track. Our renewable portfolio standard is a great example where we're, barely at 50% of the current in-state solar generation goals under the Clean Energy Jobs Act. I don't want to suggest that we shouldn't be pursuing aggressively our far-reaching 2030 goals, but I do think for those goals to really have a lasting effect, it's critical that the Commission and MDE also dig into what those current barriers are to deploying and reaching the current goals. I want to share that the Climate Partners, which is a group that I co-chair made up of technical experts and community organizations, environmental groups, is really excited to partner with MDE and the Commission. And we're excited to engage in this really critical work together. So thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thanks so much, Josh. Next, Jeff Silva.
Hi, thank you very much for this opportunity and to speak. And I have I will write some written recommendations for this new session of the commission that has to do with the administration structure that'll possibly streamline and eliminate hangups and stumbling blocks that keep the commission from getting to submitting tangible recommendations to the governor and the legislature. But here are my immediate requests to the commission. Now, I've said this for Republican governor, the former Governor Hogan, and I'll say this the same for Governor Moore. The prevailing west winds will blow greenhouse gases from West Virginia and Virginia into Maryland's population centers. Now, the MCCC should recommend to Governor Moore to design the meeting/confrontation with Republican governors Youngkin and Justice to publicly put the spotlight on them to reduce their greenhouse gases. That Republican source pollution harms the lungs of Maryland citizens, and it will negate any expenditures we make to reduce our own greenhouse gases. I want to please accept my thanks to the legislature for their brave Climate Solutions Now Act that was passed. And this means that we will be able to advance. Well, we are in the lead now as far as goals across the country. It's very brave, and now it's in the commission's lap. Number two, to help out with this effort, the MCCC should request a tax on fossil fuels bought particularly in the areas of Maryland that are directly facing climate change damage, to pay for the relocation of those displaced by climate change caused damage. It will demonstrate to them that we are being proactive, but there are other communities that are far ahead in advancing and helping the state meet its climate change goals, but they too are pulling their hair out on how to meet their own goals, such as Montgomery County. Number three, raise the registration fees on all fossil fuel vehicles that weigh more than 2 tons to reduce the deaths to pedestrians and bicyclists. Also, that revenue could help fund climate change programs for farmers and urban citizens. Earlier it was discussed, or the issue was brought up about tire wear. Well, these heavier gas fueled vehicles, not only are their subsystem and infrastructure causing extreme damage to the earth here and also everywhere else, and the tire damage from these excessively heavy vehicles is precisely what that gentleman that preceded me should be addressing. Increase that tire registration and it will pay. We also have already a tax on that registers tires. It's that DOT registration number that gets recorded for every tire that's sold.
Thanks,
Placing
Jeff.
a tax
I'm
on
sorry,
those
we're
tires.
past time, so if you wouldn't mind, concluding, Jeff, I'm very sorry.
I understand. I'm concluding anyway, but by raising a tire registration tax will also send a signal to the electric vehicles that they too have to reduce their weight. And everybody, and also that incidental pollution from worn tire dust will be able to be mitigated. Those are my recommendations for your problems, and I hope that they make some assistance to your meeting your goals. Thanks again for the opportunity. Bye now.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silver. Did I miss anyone for public comments? Okay, so I think we can move to our closing. We've heard a lot of good input about priorities for the year. Thank you all for that. Secretary McElwain, if you'd like to offer any closing thoughts.
Yeah, I thought this was a really good start in terms of our first meeting this year. Yeah, we have a lot to talk about, a lot to discuss. So I'm just looking forward to, again, us working together and going a little deeper into some of these issues as we're getting reports from some of the, from all of the different groups that are contributing to the decisions that we have to make. And thank you for the remarks that were made in the beginning too. It kind of gave all of us an idea of what's been going on and what we should be thinking about, and just really helping to shape the conversation and the thoughts for all of us. And thank you for that. And for that, that's it for me.
Great, thanks so much. You have a tree on your way out. I'll get
Tree. Thank you.
Art, trees came from you all. Thank you. Yeah, that's what you're. Take my coat.
Thanks for chasing my phone. I know, I wouldn't have gotten very far.
Well, I was trying to join you because I was trying